As a storytelling medium, the animated film is quite unique in the fact that it's the only medium in which creativity reigns supreme. Theoretically, in animation, the only limits on what you can accomplish are set forth by your own imagination. To quote Disney again, if you can dream it, you can do it. And whether it's traditional hand-drawn animation or computer-generated imagery, animation holds the future of the filmmaking industry. If you look back at all the Hollywood blockbusters from the last 5 years, I can almost guarantee you that at least 90% of them relied on animation, or techniques developed by the animation industry, probably in the form of CGI, to tell a part of their story. And like Mr. Disney predicted all those years ago, animation is the future of making dreams into reality. Unlike real life, there are no limits to a virtual world, whether generated in a computer or drawn on a piece of paper. This is probably why I have such a high regard for the medium, and such high standards for what I expect to see. Even if an animated film doesn't meet my expectations in regard to the storytelling, I expect it to be at least creative and imaginative. If not, what's the point? If we don't do that, we're basically popping out skin-deep cookie-cutter garbage like the Emoji Movie or Angry Birds. And animation can be so much deeper, so much more profound, at least with visuals and raw ideas. Even when flawed, an animated film should be a beautiful or creative medium. The key word being should. And that's what brought me to the Disney masterpiece I'm covering today, Treasure Planet. One of the greatest examples of the flawed beauty concept ever put on the silver screen. Treasure Planet was years in the making. It was the passion project of legendary Disney directors Ron Clements and John Musker. The same Clements and Musker who had already directed The Great Mouse Detective, The Little Mermaid, Aladdin, and Hercules. It was meant to be their swan song, the purpose of all that came before. In fact, it was the only movie out of the ones listed that they actually wanted to direct. So why did it take 4 films for them to be able to do it? To put it bluntly, Disney did not want them to. And that's understandable when you look at the film in context. At the time, it was an unproved idea. It wasn't a safe movie to make. This was before Pirates of the Caribbean revitalized the swashbuckling genre, back when pirates were dead in the water as far as films were concerned. Not only that, but Clements and Musker were looking to take pirates into space. The concept had everything going against it. They were taking a classic and beloved novel, stripping most of the familiar and recognizable elements from it, and replacing them with strange science fiction equivalents. This was also during an era where science fiction, especially the Space Odyssey, had been at a low point in the box office. Everything about the movie was a risk for Disney. But Musker and Clements would not let go of their animation dream and were persistent in making it come true. And after faithfully serving for 4 successful films that they initially hadn't wanted to make, the Disney executives finally relented and let them pursue their wild idea of Treasure Island in space as a reward for their success. On paper, the idea seemed bold and exciting, but in reality it was fraught with problems. The first, and most glaring of which, was how to convert Robert Louis Stevenson's classic book into a modern blockbuster. The novel, which was well over 100 years old by the time production started, did not really lend itself to the animated picture in terms of pacing. Even Disney's own original live-action adaptation of the novel in 1950 had become outdated in this regard. Needless to say, characters began to shift dramatically in personality and appearance from the original book. Long John Silver evolved from a peg-legged human to a bulky alien cyborg. His parrot that copied voices turned into a morphing alien that copied whole appearances. Captain Smollett shifted to a strong female character. Dr. Livesey became Dilbert Doppler, and his role expanded and absorbed other characters to become the financial backer of the Treasure Planet expedition, as well as welcome comic relief. Ben Gunn transformed from an old hermit into a rusty robot. And finally, Jim Hawkins became a more rebellious, more modern teenager with a thrill-seeking passion in sailing through the air. In addition, some serious tweaking was needed to not only streamline the plot, but to convert it into a totally different genre. Sacrifices were made, characters were cut, tones were shifted, and plot points were abbreviated. As adapting a novel was the most difficult issue facing the film, it was also naturally the cause of its biggest mistakes. Most of Treasure Planet's criticism is founded on the story and its occasional lack of clear focus. There are jarring tonal shifts that jump between serious and humorous segments all too quickly, plot holes that are not fully explained and that are therefore misunderstood, and several other issues that some might consider flaws. However, for myself and many other people who saw this film, most of these issues didn't matter that much when compared to the overall adventure of the film. And that was the point. To Clements and Musker, Treasure Planet's story was serving a very specific purpose, providing a skeleton onto which they could build wild new ideas and forge stunning visuals the likes of which had never before been seen in animation. They were in it to push the boundaries of their craft and practice the mastery of animation as a storytelling medium. If it resulted in a few issues with the plot, then so be it. A great example of this visual prioritization was Clements and Musker's invention of the Ethereum. The directors have gone on record to say that the Ethereum, Treasure Planet's version of space, was meant to have breathable air. And although this makes no sense when you consider the laws of science or even the expectations of fantastical science fiction, it was to serve the creative purpose of allowing space vessels to appear more like sailing ships, and for space to more closely resemble the ocean. It was supposed to be less like outer space and more like a sea between planets that stood in for islands. And although many people criticize this decision, there is no denying that it was made for a purpose, a conscious decision for an atmosphere, rather than an omitted mistake. The same thing even goes for the jarring tonal shifts. For instance, the robot Ben, played by a wild Martin Short, who stands in the role of Hermit Ben Gunn from the novel, is often cited as too outrageous or funny when compared to the majority of the cast, and scenes with him in them are complete tonal shifts from the rest of the movie. And while this is sometimes true, it also served a very important creative purpose. Again, Musker and Clements were attempting to push the boundaries of what was possible in animation at the time, and so they used Ben as an opportunity to experiment with relatively new CGI animation. Martin Short's crazy performance gave them a chance to push CGI to its limits in terms of movement. Up until that point, it had been extremely difficult to integrate CGI with traditional hand-drawn animation because of how different the two looked next to each other on the screen. When compared to each other, hand-drawn was usually seen as much more fluid, and CGI as stiffer and more limited. But Ben and Short's performance as the character allowed his movements to be more exaggerated and fluid, more seamlessly integrating with other hand-drawn characters. These are just a few examples of the decisions that were highly criticized on Treasure Planet, but were made for a very important creative purpose, a purpose that the audience latched onto. Even if it wasn't fully understood, many audiences could somehow feel the passion behind these creative choices, and the overall beauty of the film they were a part of. In addition, many people saw past these mistakes and embraced the grander ideas presented in the film. In many ways, it was ahead of its time. Even if the plot was lacking, people were drawn into this new world and captivated by it. They wanted to be a part of it. The directors credited this unique design vision to what they called the 30-70 rule. This rule stated that for every 30% of a scene that was science fiction, 70% had to be Victorian in design to compensate. They wanted the film to be grounded in its history as a pirate story, and that came through 70% of the visuals, creating a perfect balance between the science fiction elements of their vision and the classic storybook feel of the novel's roots. If you examine the film closely, you'll see that this careful design prevented the film from accidentally stumbling into the stereotypical science fiction look. Everything has an air of mystery and discovery, because it is neither too advanced nor too familiar. It is an artistic style that naturally creates a necessity for never-before-seen ideas. You may think that this is a lot of extra work for very little return, but the design of Treasure Planet is what makes people interested in it in the first place. And Clements and Musker's vision was to revitalize interest in the original novel, and this rule allowed them to succeed, captivating people's attention and making them want to go back to the original design that inspired it. And that's why Treasure Planet is largely considered to be an underrated Disney masterpiece. Most of the people who see the film are enraptured by the style and look of the film. They can't forget it because they've never seen anything quite like it. It's the exhilaration of Jim's solar sailing through the clouds, the eerie green glow of the hologram map to Treasure Planet, the slow wonder of realizing the moon is actually an enormous space station, the wild cyborg arm of Long John Silver, the ship riding through the storm of a black hole, or a breathtaking planet-wide portal through space and time. These are the images that are forever branded into the viewer's psyche. And even though all the world seemed against their dream, John Musker and Ron Clements never gave up. Even when it was released, the box office numbers seemed to mock the director's vision, as very few people even knew that the film existed at the time. However, slowly but surely their vision proved right when the film was acknowledged by a majority of critics and was generally loved by the small amount of people who did go see it. Nominated for an Academy Award of Best Animated Picture, Treasure Planet quickly gained a cult following, becoming a beloved film for Disney fans all over the globe. Treasure Planet remains a prime example of why I love movies. I'd rather see a flawed film that takes risks and pursues crazy new ideas than one that plays it safe and paints by the numbers. That's what I go to the movies for. That's what I want to see in a film, particularly an animated one. I want to escape the real world, and that's what animation does, stretching the limits of what's possible and breaking rules that live action never could. I want to see risks taken, even if they don't always pay off. I want to see the stuff of dreams unfold before my very eyes. That's the spirit that Treasure Planet represents, the spirit of risks and boundless imagination. And that's what separates Treasure Planet's unique brand of risk-taking compared to movies like The Emoji Movie or Angry Birds. These films are using animation as an excuse to be illogical, whereas Treasure Planet is being illogical as an excuse to animate. Decisions are purposefully made to create something that you could never see in real life. It's not an afterthought to just create animation that covers your mistakes. If you're going to make mistakes, they should be by choice.
You got the makings of greatness in you, but you gotta take the helm and chart your own course. Stick to it, no matter the squalls. And when the time comes, you get the chance to really test the cut of your sails and show what you're made of. Well, I hope I'm there, catching some of the light coming off you that